Why was she the only one standing in silence when the orders came down? The room smelled faintly of sweat, dust, and burnt coffee, the kind of scent that clung to briefing tents after too many long nights. Maps spread across the folding table, illuminated by a single flickering lamp. Every man around her was seated, leaning forward, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on the officer at the head of the table. She stood not out of arrogance, not because she wanted to, but because there weren't enough chairs. No one offered her one, and maybe that told her everything she needed to know. Her uniform was clean, pressed like theirs. Her boots bore the same desert scars, but the looks that darted her way weren't the looks of brothers in arms. They were measuring glances, questioning, doubting, as if she had walked into a circle she hadn't been invited to. The officer's voice droned steady. Coordinates, call signs, extraction windows, but underneath every syllable she felt the weight of something unsaid. Something no one wanted to voice aloud. Her heart beat harder than it should have, the kind of rhythm you feel in your fingertips. She wanted to grip the table just to anchor herself, but she didn't. She let her hands hang loose at her sides, fighting the urge to fidget. She remembered her father's words before she shipped out. They'll test you before they trust you. Remember that. Stand taller than the room. She was trying. God, she was trying. And yet, why did it feel like she was already losing? The officer's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. This is your assignment. You'll be embedded with Falcon Team 24 hours out. Your insertion point is classified until wheels up. Questions. She swallowed. The men around her shifted, muttered low responses. No one looked at her, not even once. She raised her hand, not high, just enough. Permission to speak, sir. The officer's gaze met hers. For the first time that evening, she wasn't invisible, but the silence that fell across the room was suffocating. Granted. Her throat tightened. The words she'd prepared sounded sharper in her head. Now they felt fragile. With respect, sir, this assignment, why me? There it was. The question she wasn't supposed to ask. A few soldiers coughed under their breath, as if masking laughter. One leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. The officer didn't blink. Because you're the one who passed the test. That was it. No explanation. No elaboration. Just those clipped words that felt heavier than bullets. She lowered her hand, heat burning her cheeks. She wanted to push back, to demand more, but the steel in his voice told her not to. The meeting ended with the scrape of chairs and low chatter, boots against dirt. The men filed out one by one, not a single nod in her direction. She stood there for a moment longer, staring at the map. Her eyes landed on a small red circle, marked with an X. Something about it made her stomach twist. That wasn't just a target, that was familiar. Too familiar. She shoved the thought down before it consumed her. Not here, not now. Outside, the desert night wrapped around her like a suffocating cloak. The air was cool, but her skin was hot. The camp stretched in silence, only the faint hum of generators and distant crackle of radios breaking the stillness. She walked toward the barracks, her boots crunching over gravel. Each step felt heavier than the last. And then a voice stopped her. You think too loud. She froze. A man leaned against the corner of the barracks, arms folded, half hidden in shadow. He wasn't one of the soldiers from the briefing. His uniform carried no insignia she recognized. His stance was calm, relaxed, but his eyes, those eyes, watched her with a weight that made her chest tighten. She narrowed her gaze. Excuse me. He tilted his head. Inside, you wanted answers, but you weren't really asking him. You were asking yourself. Her pulse spiked. Who was he to read her so cleanly? And you are, she asked. He pushed off the wall, stepping into the glow of a nearby floodlight. His face was rough, scarred along the jawline. Not old, but seasoned. Weathered by places he didn't need to name. Someone who's been where you're about to go. His voice was quiet, but it carried a kind of authority she couldn't place. Not rank, not command, something else. She crossed her arms, a shield. And where exactly am I about to go? For the first time he smiled, a thin, humorless curve of lips, somewhere that will break you if you let it. Her chest rose and fell too quickly. She hated that he'd shaken her balance so easily. "Look," she said sharply, "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I don't answer to." He cut her off with a single look. Not anger, not arrogance, just knowing. "Don't mistake silence for absence," he said. "When it matters, you'll know who I am." And with that he turned and walked away, his boots fatting into the dark. She stood rooted to the ground, every instinct in her screaming for clarity. But none came. Only the echo of his words lingered, burning deeper than she wanted to admit. Back in her bunk, she lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the generator bleeding through the walls. Sleep wouldn't come, not with the map burned into her mind, not with his voice echoing in her chest, and not with the memory she couldn't suppress any longer. That red circle, that X, it wasn't just familiar. It was home, her hometown, and she hadn't told anyone. Not yet. What did it mean when the mission map marked her own hometown? She couldn't shake it. The more she tried to bury the thought, the more it surfaced, clawing at her nerves like a parasite she couldn't cut out. The red circle on that folded paper wasn't just a location. It was memory, childhood roads, a schoolyard, the gas station where her father used to buy her ice cream after church on Sundays. Now it was marked for something else. And she hadn't told anyone. Not the officer, not the men in that room, not even the stranger with the scar who seemed to know more than he should. Lying in her bunk, eyes open to the stale dark, she felt her chest tighten. She wanted to breathe, but each breath came shallow, broken by thoughts she couldn't quiet. When the alarm for morning briefing buzzed, she wasn't sure if she had even slept. The desert sun was already burning the horizon when she stepped outside, her canteen cold against her palm. Soldiers moved in purposeful rhythm around her, checking weapons, tightening straps, laughing too loudly at jokes that didn't sound funny. The kind of laughter people use to drown nerves. No one met her eyes. Except him. He was there again, the scarred man, standing near the vehicles, hands behind his back, posture loose but unshakable. He watched her as if he'd been waiting. Her boots slowed. She considered ignoring him, pretending she didn't notice, but something in his gaze pulled at her, steady and unmoving. She walked toward him before she could talk herself out of it. "Last night," she said quietly, stopping a few feet away, "you talked like you knew what was coming." His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite dismissal. "And you still think I was acting?" The words hit harder than they should have. "I think," she replied carefully, "you're enjoying the mystery a little too much." His eyes narrowed, not with anger, with patience. Mystery keeps people alive, doubt kills them. She folded her arms, the desert wind tugging at her sleeves. "So what are you really? Intel, shadow op, some handler they won't name?" "Maybe," he said, "or maybe I'm here to see if you're what they think you are." Her throat tightened. "And what's that?" The faintest pause, his voice dropped lower, "A survivor." Before she could answer, a whistle cut the air. The officer barked orders, soldiers gathered. The scarred man stepped back, fading into the movement like a shadow that never belonged to the light. She hated herself for looking over her shoulder twice. "Stop it," she told herself. "Focus." The convoy rolled out an hour later. Humvees kicked up plumes of dust, engines growling against the endless expanse of desert. She sat in the back, rifle pressed between her knees, helmet resting heavy against her brow. The men across from her didn't speak to her, not directly, but she caught fragments of their conversation, sports, wives back home, the food they missed. Then one of them, a broad-shouldered corporal with sunburnt skin, finally looked at her. "You ever been downrange before?" His tone wasn't mocking. It wasn't friendly either. She straightened. "Once." "Once," he repeated, dragging the word. "Hope you paid attention, because this one won't be clean." The man beside him chuckled. "None of them are." The words hung in the hot air, heavier than the rattling metal around them. She kept her face still, but her stomach tightened. They didn't need to know where she'd been before, or what it had cost. A flash of memory struck her anyway, blood on her gloves, a child's cry muffled in her ears, the radio screaming garbled commands she couldn't follow fast enough. She blinked hard, shutting it down before it showed on her face. The convoy slowed. Engines dropped to an idle rumble. Dust swirled, choking the horizon. The officer's voice cracked over the radio. "This is staging point Alpha. Dismount." Boots hit dirt. The team spread out, scanning, weapons raised. She shouldered her rifle, the weight both familiar and alien, like carrying part of herself she no longer recognized. The village ahead was small, sand-colored walls, crumbling stone, windows shuttered, silent, too silent. Her breath tightened again, not because of the danger, because she recognized the shape of the rooftops, the broken spire of the old mosque. This wasn't just any village. It was 3 miles outside the town where she grew up. Her heartbeat became thunder. "Move," the officer ordered. The team advanced in staggered formation, rifles cutting the silence. Dogs barked in the distance. A door creaked shut. Somewhere, a child's laugh echoed and vanished. She kept her eyes forward, but her chest burned. Every step brought her closer to streets she knew as a child, streets now hollowed by war. "Eyes open," a soldier muttered behind her. They reached the center of the village. No gunfire, no shouts, just silence pressing in on them like a vice. The officer raised a fist. The team froze. And then movement. A figure stepped out from an alley, hands raised. A man thin, clothes torn, beard ragged. His eyes darted wildly, but his palms were open, shaking. "Contact," someone whispered. The man spoke quickly in a language half the team didn't understand. She caught fragments, enough to piece it together. "Don't shoot, please. They took my family, they're still here." Her stomach twisted. The officer barked for an interpreter. One of the soldiers stepped up, translating rough and fast. The man's words spilled out like water from a broken jar, pleading, desperate. The team listened. The officer's jaw tightened. Orders followed. "Search, secure, clear every building." And that's when she saw him. The scarred man, standing at the edge of the square just beyond the reach of the unit, watching her. Again. She blinked, her heart lurched. He wasn't supposed to be here. He hadn't ridden in the convoy. No one else even noticed him. And yet there he was, calm, silent, eyes locked on hers. She opened her mouth to call out, then stopped. Because in that moment, something in her gut told her the truth. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't chance. He was part of this mission. Not officially, not openly, but in a way that mattered more than any rank patch or command order. And the weight of that realization hit harder than any bullet. What do you do when silence feels more dangerous than sound? The village square seemed frozen in time. No shouting, no rushing footsteps, just the hollow stillness of walls that had seen too much. Dust shifted in the wind, curling around boots, whispering against stone. The officer gave the signal. The team fanned out, rifles raised, eyes sharp. She followed, her finger hovering near the trigger guard, scanning doorways and shadowed windows. Her pulse was too fast, her breathing shallow. Every corner of this place dragged at old memories. The market where she'd once chased stray dogs with friends. The fountain she'd sat beside when her father came home from deployment. The alley where she'd scraped her knees on stone and cried until her brother carried her home. Now those places were hollow, dead. "Check that building," the corporal muttered, pointing to the spire of the old mosque. Her stomach twisted. "Copy," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. Two soldiers moved to flank her. The heavy wooden door groaned as it opened, the sound carrying like thunder through silence. Inside, the air was stale dust, old incense, faint rot, broken prayer rugs scattered across cracked tiles. The corporal swept left, she swept right. And then she froze. Carved into the wall, half hidden by shadow, was a symbol. It wasn't religious, it wasn't decorative. It was military. But not theirs. Her throat tightened. She'd seen it once before, spray-painted across rubble in the aftermath of a raid. A symbol tied to the group responsible for dozens of attacks. The group she thought she'd left behind after her first deployment. She swallowed hard, stepping back before the others noticed the change in her expression. The corporal cursed softly, "Clear." They regrouped outside. The officer was already barking updates over the radio, ordering the next sweep. But she barely heard him. Because at the edge of the square, the scarred man was still there, watching. Her boots moved before her mind caught up. She walked toward him, weaving through the patrol lines. "Why are you following me?" she demanded under her breath, low enough that no one else would hear. His expression didn't change, calm, measured. "I'm not following you," he said. "I'm watching what you'll do." The words hit like a strike to the chest. She glanced back, making sure no one else saw who she was talking to. The soldiers were busy clearing, sweeping. No one noticed. Her voice sharpened. "You knew this was my home." Finally his gaze shifted, just a fraction. "I know more than that." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" But before he could answer, a shout tore across the square. "Contact second floor." Gunfire erupted, sharp cracking echoes bouncing off stone. The world exploded into chaos, shouts, boots slamming, rifles firing. She ducked behind a wall, heart hammering, weapon raised. Dust filled the air as bullets struck brick. The villagers screamed, scattering, their voices drowned out by the staccato roar of automatic fire. The officer's voice cut through the comms. "Flank left, suppress fire." She moved without thinking, instincts dragging her toward the building. Her boots pounded the dirt, her rifle pressed to her shoulder, finger tight on the trigger. The corporal covered her right. A young private covered her left, his face pale, eyes wide, too young, too green. On three, the corporal shouted over the gunfire. 1, 2. The private flinched too early, breaking cover before the count. The window above spat fire. A bullet tore into the boy's vest, knocking him backward into the dirt. He screamed, clutching his chest. Her vision tunneled. "Cover," she barked, firing at the window, forcing the shooter back. Dust rained down. The corporal dragged the private behind cover, ripping open his vest. The round hadn't gone through, but it had cracked ribs, left him gasping, wheezing, tears streaming down his dirt-streaked face. "I can't," the boy sobbed. "I can't breathe." "Shut up and breathe shallow," the corporal growled, panic masked as anger. She dropped beside them, tearing open her kit. Her hands shook as she pressed a compression bandage across his chest, anchoring his vest tighter, whispering words she didn't know if he heard. You're fine, look at me, look at me." The boy's eyes darted, wild, terrified. Then they fixed on hers, and for a moment he stilled, his breath shallow, broken, but steadying. She nodded once, forcing calm into her own veins. "Good, stay with me, you're not done." Gunfire roared overhead. The corporal covered their position, shouting curses between bursts. And then a single crack split the chaos, different, sharper, a sniper's round. The window above shattered. The enemy fire went silent. She whipped her head toward the source. The scarred man. He was on the rooftop across the square, rifle balanced, smoke curling from the barrel. Her stomach dropped. No insignia, no orders, no authorization. But he'd just saved them. The officer's voice screamed over comms, demanding a status update. No one mentioned the rooftop. No one saw him but her. The square quieted, smoke drifting like ghosts through broken light. The private coughed, still alive. The corporal clapped her shoulder roughly. "Nice work, he'll make it, you did good." But she didn't feel good. Her hands still shook, her chest still burned. Because the man on that rooftop wasn't supposed to exist. And yet, without him, the boy would be dead. Her throat tightened. What kind of authority moves like that? What kind of man kills from the shadows, saves lives but wears no name? And why did it feel like he wasn't here for the mission at all, but for her? Why did it bother her more that he saved them than if he had done nothing at all? The square still smelled of gunpowder. Smoke lingered in the air like a heavy fog, clinging to her hair, her clothes, her skin. The boy's shallow breaths mixed with the occasional cough of dust-choked villagers hiding in doorways. But her eyes weren't on them. They were locked on that rooftop. He wasn't there anymore. The scarred man had vanished. No trace, no silhouette against the sky, just empty stone and drifting smoke. She gripped her rifle tighter, her knuckles white. The officer's voice was sharp, snapping her back to the moment. "Clear the sector, sweep every floor." The soldiers surged forward again, boots hammering, weapons raised. She followed, but her mind wasn't with her rifle or her steps. It was on the man who moved like a ghost. Who was he really? And why was it starting to feel like every bullet, every choice, every second of this mission was orbiting around her, not the target? The corporal glanced at her as they entered the next building, his voice low. "That kid's alive because of you. Don't forget that." She nodded once, jaw tight, but she didn't believe him, not entirely. Because she knew the truth. The kid was alive because of him. And she hated how powerless that made her feel. The building's interior was cramped, walls crumbling, dust thick in the air. Broken furniture piled in corners. A child's toy lay abandoned on the floor, its painted wood chipped and faded. Her boot nudged it accidentally, the faint clatter echoing too loud in the silence. She froze. Her chest tightened, not from danger, from memory. It was the same kind of toy her brother had carved for her when she was 6. A horse, painted red. She carried it everywhere until war came to their town, until the streets burned, until her family scattered. She pressed the memory down, hard, forcing herself back into the present. "Clear," someone whispered from the next room. They pushed through the upper floors, room by room, each one empty, each one echoing with ghosts of lives ripped away. By the time they regrouped outside, the sun was sliding lower, throwing long shadows across the square. The officer called it. "We hold here until nightfall, patrols every hour, stay sharp." The men set to work, establishing a perimeter, positioning rifles, checking ammo, routine that masked exhaustion. She sat near the well at the center of the square, pulling off her helmet, running a hand across her damp forehead. The boy lay a few meters away, bandaged and pale but breathing steady. The corporal watched over him like a hawk, hiding his worry behind gruff orders. For a moment, she let herself breathe. And then she felt it. The presence. She looked up. He was there again. Not on the rooftops this time, not in shadow. Closer, leaning against the broken archway of the mosque, his scar catching the dying light, his eyes fixed on her. She stood before she realized she'd moved. Crossing the square, her boots crunching over sand and glass, her pulse hammering harder with each step. When she reached him, her voice cracked low, sharp. "Enough, who the hell are you?" His gaze didn't waver. "You already know." Her throat tightened, anger mixed with fear, and she hated both. "What I know is you're not supposed to be here. No insignia, no chain of command, no name. Yet you're pulling triggers in my fight. Why?" His jaw shifted, not with defensiveness, with patience. "Because this is just your fight," he said. It never was. Her chest rose heavy. Then tell me what it is. Tell me why my hometown is marked on that map. Tell me why you're here in my mission, walking through my ghosts. Finally, a flicker of something crossed his scarred face. Not arrogance, not amusement. Regret. You think you were sent here by chance, he said quietly. You were. This was always where it was going to lead. Her breath caught. The words felt like a blade sliding into her chest. What do you mean? But before he could answer, a shout cut the air. Movement south wall. Rifles raised, boots scrambled, the soldiers surged toward the perimeter. She turned, instinct screaming. Figures in the distance, shadows slipping through the low light, rifles glinting. Not civilians, not allies. The officer barked commands. Flares shot into the sky, bathing the square in harsh white light. The shadows broke into a sprint. Gunfire erupted. The square exploded into chaos again. Muzzle flashes lit the dusk. Bullets shattered stone. Soldiers shouted, ducking, firing back. She dropped into cover, rifle snapping to her shoulder, firing controlled bursts. Each shot rattled her bones. Each one brought her closer to the truth she didn't want to face. This wasn't a random attack. This was personal. She could feel it. The enemy wasn't just testing the perimeter. They were circling, probing, drawing them out. And in the chaos, she lost sight of him. The scarred man, gone again. She cursed under her breath, firing until her magazine clicked empty. She reloaded, hands moving on instinct, breath ragged. The corporal's voice roared from across the square. Hold the line, don't let them breach. And then silence. Abrupt, sudden. The gunfire stopped as quickly as it started. The square went still again, smoke hanging heavy in the air, flares burning out into darkness. She stayed frozen, rifle raised, finger tight on the trigger. But no one came. No more shadows, no more fire, just silence pressing against her ears. The officer swore under his breath, packing, shouting into the radio for updates. Nothing but static came back. The men shifted, uneasy, eyes darting, fingers restless on triggers. She lowered her rifle slowly, chest still heaving, sweat dripping down her temples. And then from the far wall a voice called out, not English, not friendly, words she hadn't heard in years but understood instantly. Words that froze her blood. We know who you are. The men didn't understand, not all of them, but she did. Every syllable burned into her chest. She swallowed hard, forcing her face to stay blank, her rifle steady. But inside, everything shattered. Because whoever they were, whoever hunted them tonight, didn't care about Falcon Team, didn't care about the mission. They were here for her. And she hadn't told anyone. Not yet. The chopper blade slowed, groaning into silence, leaving only the rasp of boots on gravel. The valley was too quiet. No children, no market chatter, not even the call of a goat. Just emptiness, and emptiness, she knew, meant eyes watching. Why did her gut feel heavier than her gear? She had walked into silence before, but this one carried weight. It pressed down, thick, almost deliberate, as if the earth itself held its breath. Her rifle rested easy in her hands, though her fingers twitched against the trigger guard. One step, then another, dust rising, nothing moving. And then a sound, not loud, not even threatening. A tin cup rolled from the doorway of an abandoned house, rattling over stone, tapping metal against earth until it fell still. She raised her rifle instantly, barrel locking onto shadows. But the figure who stepped out was not holding a weapon, not raising hands, not begging either. He walked slow, tall, steady. His uniform was stripped of markings, patches torn away, leaving only scars stitched into fabric. She frowned. Who was he? The men behind her stiffened, rifles trained. Yet he raised his voice, not loud, not angry, calm, low, commanding. You're in the wrong place for noise, he said. Lower your barrels. Her heart thudded. She almost laughed. This stranger thought he could give orders here. He didn't wear rank, didn't flash credentials. His voice carried no insignia. And yet every man behind her obeyed, weapons lowered almost without hesitation. She did not yet. Her scope framed his chest, her eyes steady. "Who the hell are you?" she demanded. For the first time he looked at her. His eyes were sharp, lined with exhaustion, carrying something unspoken. "You'll learn," he said quietly, "but not here." And then he turned, walking into the ruined building as if it were his own command post. No hesitation, no backward glance. Her team followed. She didn't. Not immediately, because something in her resisted. Something told her this wasn't just another local guide or washed-up veteran. No, his authority wasn't borrowed. It was owned. And she hated, absolutely hated, that she felt it before she understood it. She stepped inside. The air was colder there, shadows clinging like smoke. Maps taped to cracked plaster walls, coded notes scrawled in handwriting that wasn't rushed, photographs pinned with care, surveillance detail, intel precise and methodical, gathered long before her unit arrived. The man stood at the far end, back to them, marking circles on the map with a piece of charcoal. He didn't look up when he spoke. "They'll come from the ridge by dawn. They'll expect you to wait by the river. That's what command told you, isn't it?" Her chest tightened. She said nothing. He turned. For the first time she saw his face in full. Lined, weathered, yes, but steady, carved with the patience of someone who had lived through battles no briefing could explain. "I don't care what your orders are," he said. "If you want your people alive, you'll follow mine." The room fell silent. Every soldier looked at her, because she was technically in charge of this team. Their commander was watching. Her decision was the line between trust and defiance. And in that silence, she realized something terrifying. She wanted to trust him. But why? Why did his voice carry weight heavier than rank, heavier than doctrine? Why did she, who had trained to command, suddenly feel like a soldier again, standing in the presence of someone who didn't need to prove anything? She lowered her rifle slow, not because he ordered it, not because the others watched, but because somehow she already knew this man wasn't acting. He was authority. And authority never begged to be believed. It simply existed. The rain began before dawn, a thin curtain sweeping across the valley, soaking stone and cloth, seeping into boots. She sat against a crumbling wall, rifle across her knees, listening to the rhythm of drops against metal. It was easier than listening to her own thoughts. Why had she lowered her rifle? Why had she obeyed a man with no insignia, no rank, no proof? It gnawed at her, bitter and restless. She closed her eyes for a breath. Behind them flickered memories she never invited. Her brother's laughter before deployment, his voice promising he'd come home, the folded flag pressed into her mother's shaking hands. He had followed orders. He had trusted command, and it had cost him everything. So why was she now following someone else? "Can't sleep," the voice came from the shadows, him, the stranger. She didn't look at him. "Don't need sleep." A pause. Then the soft scrape of boots on gravel as he sat nearby, leaving a space between them. Not too close, not distant either. He didn't speak immediately. He let the silence linger, as if testing whether she would fill it. Finally he said, "You don't trust me." Her jaw tightened. "You noticed." "I'd be worried if you did." He glanced toward the horizon, where the ridge cut black against the paling sky. Trust given too easily doesn't hold when it matters. His words settled heavier than she wanted them to. She hated that he made sense. She turned to him sharply. "Then tell me who you are. Tell me why my men listened to you the second you spoke." The rain tapped steady on his shoulders, tracing dark lines down his jacket. He didn't answer at once. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on knees, voice low. "Names don't matter here, but what I've seen, that matters. I've buried good people because orders came from desks instead of dirt. I've watched missions fail because someone refused to bend to the ground truth. Her throat tightened. She thought of her brother again. He continued, softer now. You think I want to be here. You think I want strangers doubting me at every turn. No. But when the ridge erupts tomorrow, when the first round cracks the air, you'll see. Authority doesn't come from patches or papers. It comes from knowing what keeps people alive. She hated how steady his words were. No arrogance, no pleading, just conviction. She exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of choices pressing in from all sides. She wanted to ask more, to demand details, but his expression told her she wouldn't get them. Not yet. Instead, she asked the only question that mattered, and if you're wrong. His gaze cut to hers, unflinching. Then I'll be the first one buried. The quiet between them grew sharp, broken only by the rain. She searched his face, waiting for a crack, a flicker of doubt. None came. Boots shuffled nearby, one of her men, pale in the gray dawn. "Ma'am," he said, voice tight, "drone feed just came through. Movement on the ridge, he's right. They're setting up positions now." Her chest hollowed. She turned back toward the man, but he was already standing, pulling gear into place with practiced ease. "Get your people ready," he said. "We don't have much time." For a moment she simply stared at him. The rain blurred her vision, though she didn't blink it away. Her gut twisted with the bitter taste of surrender, yet under it something else. Relief. Because deep down, she had wanted him to be right. And that terrified her more than the enemy. The ridge ignited before the sun fully broke the horizon. Muzzle flashes cracked like lightning against the gray, the sound rolling down into the valley in sharp, jagged echoes. Her men hit the dirt instantly, rifles raised, eyes wide. Training took over, but beneath it was fear. She pressed her body into the earth, cheek against the stock of her rifle, scope rising to her eye. Through the lens she saw them, figures moving in the mist, coordinated, too disciplined to be a ragged militia. This was no random skirmish. This was a trap laid with patience. Her heartbeat quickened. She thought of command's orders, the river crossing, the expected point of contact. If they'd followed that, they'd be slaughtered by now. Her throat tightened with the realization. The man's voice cut through the chaos, steady, calm, without a hint of panic. "Hold fire, wait for the second wave." Her instinct screamed against it. The first silhouettes were already lining up shots, already descending. Every nerve in her body begged to pull the trigger, but his tone, it anchored her. Her finger stayed on the guard. Against every shred of training, she waited. The seconds dragged like hours. Bullets cracked overhead, chewing through stone. One of her men hissed, "They'll overrun us." "Not yet," the man said. His voice never rose, never faltered. "Watch the ridgeline." She did, and then she saw it, more figures emerging, heavier armed, moving in tight formation. The real attack force. The first wave had been bait. If they'd fired early, their positions would have been marked, pinned, erased. Her breath caught. He had known. "Now," he said. She squeezed the trigger. Her round cut the morning silence, followed by the thunder of her unit opening fire in perfect sync. The first row of attackers crumpled, momentum shattered before it reached the valley floor. Surprise worked in their favor now. The enemy hadn't expected resistance so precise, so timed. The fight surged. Smoke and dust filled the air. The acrid sting of gunpowder burned her nose, mixing with the iron tang of blood. She barked orders through the chaos, her voice sharp, commanding. But beneath it all, she leaned on his silent presence, on the unshakable certainty he carried into every breath. One of her men went down with a cry, clutching his leg. She scrambled to drag him back, bullets stitching the dirt around them. And then he was there, the stranger, covering them with fire, movements fluid, controlled. No hesitation. He fought not as someone proving himself, but as someone who had done this 100 times before. When they pulled the wounded soldier into cover, she looked at him, really looked. Mud streaked his face, blood on his sleeve, but his eyes, steady, unmoved. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, breath ragged between bursts of fire. He didn't glance at her, just reloaded with quiet efficiency. "Because they don't know what I know, and you don't see what I've seen, not yet." His words hit harder than the gunfire. She wanted to demand answers, to tear the truth from him, but there was no time. The ridge still bled shadows, enemies pressing harder, determined to break their line. She fought with everything she had, muscles burning, throat raw. Through the haze of battle she caught glimpses of him moving, directing, steadying, saving men who would have fallen. And with every decision he made, every risk he took, the gnawing doubt in her chest shifted. This wasn't just authority. This was responsibility carried like a wound, invisible yet undeniable. When the last shots faded and silence returned, the valley was different. Smoke curled over broken ground, bodies lay still against the stone, and her men, shaken, breathing hard, were alive. Alive because they hadn't followed the orders given from a clean desk miles away. Alive because they had followed him. She lowered her rifle, hands trembling. Sweat, rain, blood, all mixed on her skin. Her chest heaved, not just from exhaustion, but from the weight of what had been proven. He stood a few feet away, scanning the ridge for movement, expression unreadable. He hadn't looked at her once, didn't ask for thanks, didn't seek recognition. But every man in her unit was looking at him now. And she knew, without speaking, without ceremony, the shift had happened. The authority she had clung to out of duty was no longer hers alone. It was his, always had been. She hated it, she respected it, she needed it. And deep inside, where the silence of her own grief lived, she finally admitted the truth. He wasn't just acting, he never had been. He was everything her brother had died believing existed, someone who bore the weight others couldn't, someone whose authority wasn't given, it was earned. And she couldn't decide if that truth broke her or saved her. The valley lay quiet again, but it was not the quiet of peace. It was the silence that followed violence, a silence too heavy for words. Smoke hung low, curling from shattered stone. The air stank of cordite and blood. She walked among her men, her boots crunching over broken rock, her eyes catching the hollow stares of soldiers who had given everything they could just to see another sunrise. Some leaned against walls, bandages pressed into bleeding flesh. Others sat with heads bowed, rifles limp across their laps. She checked each one, a hand on a shoulder, a brief nod, no speeches. They didn't need speeches. They needed to know their commander still saw them, still stood with them. But inside she was unraveling. She had always carried herself as someone unshaken, someone hardened by loss. Her brother's absence had forged her resolve. His death had carved duty into her bones. She told herself she commanded because she must, because no one else would. But then he had arrived. The man without rank, without name, without recognition, and in a single battle he had shifted everything. Her command, her authority, her certainty, it had all bent toward him. She hated it, she feared it, she trusted it. And that trust terrified her most of all. He stood apart from the others now, back to the ruined wall, cleaning the black from his weapon in silence. His hands moved with practiced care, like a ritual, not hurried, not tired, just deliberate. She found herself walking toward him before she had even decided to. "Who are you?" Her voice was sharper than she meant. "Really?" He didn't look up. "A man who's buried too many names." "That's not an answer." Finally, he lifted his gaze to hers. His eyes were quiet, steady, but in them lived something she hadn't wanted to name. Loss. The kind that doesn't fade. The kind that carves itself into your marrow and stays. "I was you," he said softly. "Once. Believed rank could shield people, believed orders were enough. Then I learned too late." Her breath caught. The words hit deeper than she expected, as though he had peeled back something she kept hidden even from herself. "You don't want my past," he added, voice lowering. You want to know if you can trust me. You already have your answer. You trusted me when it mattered." She swallowed hard, "And if I hadn't, then you'd be standing here alone." The weight of it pressed on her chest. She turned away, unable to hold his gaze any longer. Around them the men shifted quietly, stealing glances, waiting for direction, waiting not just for her anymore. It cut sharp and cold, the realization that leadership had slipped from her grasp without anyone declaring it. No ceremony, no handover, just the natural pull of true authority. But it wasn't jealousy she felt, not exactly. It was something harder to admit: relief. For so long she had carried everything alone, every loss, every name etched into memory, every promise broken. She thought she had to, that no one else could. But here he was, carrying it without asking permission, without needing reward. It broke something in her, and in that breaking it freed her too. The sun crept higher, light spilling across the ruined valley. One of her men limped past, giving her a brief, grateful nod. Another raised a hand in quiet acknowledgement. She returned each gesture, but her mind was somewhere else, on the truth she could no longer deny. She walked back to him, standing close enough that her voice barely had to rise. "Whatever you're running from," she said, steady but soft, "it doesn't change what you've done here." He said nothing, just watched her with those tired, unflinching eyes. "Sometimes," she continued, "authority isn't about the flag or the stars on your chest. Sometimes it's about being the one who doesn't look away when everyone else does." For the first time she thought she saw something shift in his expression. Not pride, not victory, just the faintest crack in the armor of silence. A human flicker. She almost smiled, almost. The valley wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of dust and smoke, carrying with it the echoes of battles that would never leave them. She knew more would come, more fights, more nights without sleep, more weight on shoulders already breaking. But in that moment, under the raw morning light, she understood something her brother never lived long enough to teach her. You don't carry it all alone. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. She turned back to her men, shoulders squared, voice steady once more. Orders came, movements began, and the valley slowly stirred back to life. But as they prepared to leave, she glanced once more at the man without rank, without name, without past. And though he never said a word, she knew. His authority wasn't a story he needed to tell. It was something everyone who stood with him could already feel. And that, more than anything, would linger long after the valley fell silent again.